Good morning, or afternoon, or wherever you may be calling in from anywhere in the world. We're very happy to host you to talk you through this year's 2023 Cleveland Water Alliance Open Innovation Challenge. Some of you may be familiar with this challenge from a version of this that we launched a couple of years ago. And this is sort of a new angle on it because this challenge has still yet to be solved. And so we're really welcoming concepts from, very early stage concepts. You don't necessarily have to have a complete solution or even a prototype, but we want to walk you through what this challenge is about and the opportunity that it represents, and give you some insights on what success would actually look like. My name is Evie Holst. I'm from the Cleveland Water Alliance. And this program is really about providing insights on where we need solutions. So, oftentimes we see innovators and they come with a eureka from the lab, something has happened. And we want to take some of that eureka and really focus it on where we need solutions because there's a significant challenge to the market. And that really every solution begins with great ideas. So this season, we're talking about how to find solutions that will help detect lead, copper, and or galvanized steel service lines or pipes that are buried underground from commercial and residential properties, between commercial and residential properties and the water main, where drinking water distribution systems are pushing that water to these homes and businesses. And we have an esteemed judges panel that's involved with this, which includes these organizations here: City of Cleveland, Cincinnati, Sandusky, Akron, and Aqua Ohio, which is part of the National Aqua America brand. So, why should we care about this? Well, there are reasons to care about this in terms of our own public health, but as an innovator, the reason to care about this is that this is a significant market opportunity and there are adoption drivers. My colleague Brenda is going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but this is a significant revenue generating opportunity. And this particular challenge will give anyone who has a potential solution direct exposure to utilities that are very interested in solving it. This challenge also will provide grant dollars to help you evolve your idea. So again, as I said, there isn't today yet a solution to this. We know that great things start with great ideas, and that having a great idea, if you want to make it real, you're going to need some support to get you going and evolve this into a real thing. And then, of course, as you do evolve your solution, there will be many testing, piloting, and demo opportunities ahead, and potential future prize money, in addition to that significant revenue generating opportunity I just described. And as you participate in this particular challenge, we also anticipate potential media exposure as your innovation evolves. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Brenda. Take it away.
Thank you. So I'm going to go over some basic background as well as what we need for the industry and the water companies. Lead lines were originally used in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and different systems used them up to 1986 when the federal law banned them, because lead was the premier type of plumbing material. It wasn't subject to corrosion. It lasted a long time. The only challenge was that humans are basically allergic to lead. So once they realized we should no longer transmit water in lead lines, they began federal laws to help regulate the amount of lead that was in water. Originally, there was lead regulations even back in the early 1900s, but those were in parts per million quantities, and now we're in parts per billion. In The federal lead and copper rule revisions, which were implemented and will go into full effect in October 2024, and there's revisions of the lead and copper rule initiative, which will be coming soon, probably in September to November timeframe, have requirements for all public water systems across the United States to actually inventory all service line material, and if it could be lead, either identify it properly or mark it as unknown, as well as develop system-wide lead service line removal plans. So if you have 4,000 unknown service line material types in your system, that means you have 4,000 lead service line removal planning purpose. There's many challenges though to identifying lead material, and part of it starts with history, and that service line wasn't always mapped for the city-owned material, and it mostly wasn't known for the customer-owned material, because until this federal law that goes into a full effect in October 2024, public water systems never had to have a knowledge of what was on the customer side. Next slide. So innovation focus is very important, and that's why we're all here today. We are hoping that your ingenuity can help develop a technology that can physically detect the water service line pipe material without breaking ground and without the use of broad data inputs such as AI prediction methods, and without sticking something into the pipe which can be disruptive to pipe scale as well as water quality. AI predictions typically depend on historical records. We already have access to that. We're actually looking for something that can physically determine if it's lead, galvanized steel, or copper buried beneath the soil. Next slide. And where is that buried? This graphic represents a typical scenario in the Cleveland water system. A is the city-owned material. It extends from the water main that runs typically beneath the street to a curb stop shutoff valve. The curb stop shutoff valve is located in the tree lawn. And then B is the customer side material, which is typically the customer side responsibility. That extends from the curb stop shutoff valve, which is typically in the tree lawn, into the customer's house. Material A and B can be the same or different. You don't see material A or B ever, and this is what we need innovations to solve, is how do we detect this material accurately without digging a hole through either excavation or hydrovacking to determine that pipe material. C and D are the only locations where you can see pipe material on the customer side. C and B may be the same, meaning if B is copper, C is copper, which is typically the case. But on occasion, someone has done foundation work where C is copper, but B could be lead. So we need technology to solve this challenge. On occasion, some homes will have a vault meter near the curb stop location, but not always. Next slide. A priority for detection of material is knowing what is lead and what is not. We do need data on what is lead and copper, and anything that is galvanized steel downstream of lead must also be treated as lead per the new federal lead and copper rule revisions. Lead lines are typically only found in areas that are less than 2 inches. Most systems, it's 1 inch or less for the inside diameter for lead. And the reason the diameter is so small is lead is extremely heavy, and it just couldn't be made in service lines larger than that diameter. Next slide. Service lines are buried at different depths across the United States. It depends on the frost zone. Here in Ohio, our frost zone in northern Ohio in the Cleveland area is 5 to 5.5 feet deep is where those service lines are buried, because the frost depth extends down farther. Down in the Cincinnati, Ohio area in southern Ohio, it's much shallower and is typically buried about 3.5 feet deep or so. So the innovation you are developing will need to be able to detect service line material at a variety of buried depths, which is dependent on the frost depth. Instead of looking at each system, just know that public water systems always ensure their infrastructure is below the frost depth for that part of the country. So if you're doing work in Florida, you got about 5 inches. If you're doing work up in the Minnesotas, you might have service lines 8 to 10 feet beneath the soil surface. Next slide. Physical detection of the service line material may be through the ground. It could be concrete, it could be soil, glacial till, sand, or any other type of substrate you'd have, or it could be through an entry point such as a curb box. There are vault curb boxes made of bricks, which a human can get inside. And there's also what's known as SP vaults, which are called sewer pipe vaults. And those are only about 18 inches wide. And the only thing you'll be able to see is the meter risers on either side. A lot of times when you pop a top on one of the brick vaults, what you see inside is not the service line material at the bottom of the vault, but substrates which may include brick, hardened concrete, flowable fill, or water even on top of that service line material. Next slide. The innovation that you need to develop needs to be portable and self-contained. Basically, there is a water service connection going from the water main in the street to every single home or building, including businesses, down a street line. Oftentimes, we will not know for sure the service lines of any of these on a given street. So the design needs to be able to be pulled, drug, pushed easily by one human being from site to site. And it's designed for use by field staff. That could be utility workers themselves who are familiar with the water system, or contractors. Basically, we need to improve service line inventories from where we start in our submittal in October of 2024 to going down the line. Next slide. The innovation should be without a need to calibrate it between two homes or two sites as you're moving down the street or even from street to street. Obviously, many devices need recalibrated on a periodic basis. Most public water systems, those devices need recalibrated about every 3 months for certification purposes. Hopefully your device wouldn't need recalibrated more than once a day. Less than that would be ideal. The device will also need to be a self-contained power source, whether that's being carried with you on your person or pulled with you on a wagon or somehow connected to a vehicle that's on the street. It needs to be self-contained. And when you're designing it, you need to think of the fact that even though a vehicle may be able to move down a street, at least on one side of the street, you usually have things blocking your way, such as cars, utility poles, etc., that you'll have to be able to move the power source around. Next slide. Ideally, the innovation will be a real-time indication of where lead is and where galvanized steel is and where copper is. Some type of computer readout that also where this data is recorded based upon the GIS address location of that home. Many systems are required to use a GIS-based system for mapping service line material types. And the data that's read out could actually be uploaded in real time to that map in a real ideal world, or at least available for the public water system to upload to their own map, which is a requirement of the federal law as well. A positive or negative indicator of the presence of lead means as a device goes down the street, there could be contract crews working behind the device. And that would be an advantage for some systems. Next slide. Our success goal is greater than 90% accuracy rate in finding lead service lines without soil excavation or digging through concrete. That will save public water systems literally millions of dollars. The current going rate for potholing to determine pipe material for a residential home is about $1,500 per site. So if you can be 90% accurate in finding lead, that will help public water systems meet their goal of removing it. Next slide. Things that won't work: breaching the pipe. Detection cannot occur by way of physically inserting something into a pipe due to the health risks associated with disturbing lead pipe and pipe scale. Many public water systems have spent the better part of 30 years developing an orthophosphate pipe scale inside pipes. And if you insert something into a pipe that is 1 inch diameter or less, you're most likely going to be scraping along the sides of that pipe. That could produce water quality problems in the home as well as on the street, both for that day, even after flushing. If the pipe scale has been destroyed, it needs weeks to months to reform depending on the system. Entering buildings is also not ideal. Half of the material that we have to have identification for is on the customer side. Customers aren't home. It's a very time-consuming process to make contact with individual property owners and set a time that's convenient for their schedule that also works for an employee's schedule to get into the home and determine pipe material. So ideally, the device would be able to be used solely working on the exterior of buildings. Next slide, or next line. Innovation must also have the desired accuracy without the use of broader data inputs, such as historical records of service line material install, or when there was a water main put in, or when the home was built. Statistical AI predictions can then aid in this device's accuracy of finding lead. That is the long-term goal. Next slide. There are test sites available. Cleveland Water has a service line research facility that has multiple ways of testing the pipe material to determine if it is actually works and determining what is copper, lead, galvanized steel, and plastic. Not all public water systems use plastic, but we want to ensure that this device can differentiate because water systems throughout the United States, some do have plastic service line material. Next slide. EB, you're on mute.
Thanks, Brenda. This is so helpful. And I'm going to ask you a few questions here myself, just to kind of get our conversation going after I outline these important dates. So letters of intent are due on June 28th. And the reason why we're requesting a letter of intent is essentially to give us a sense of, number one, how much interest do we have here? And number two, to provide some early feedback if we're able to, so for example, when we ran this type of a challenge in the past, we did get some letters of intent with a little bit of an overview of concepts. And some of those concepts, we're going to run into trouble based on some of the things that we're not interested in, as Brenda just sort of outlined for us. So, a device that would go inside of the pipe. This gives us a sense to provide some feedback to you and just say, hey, can you tweak your idea this way or that? It's required, though, as a prerequisite for actually submitting a proposal. And I will say the letter of intent is a really light lift. It's not a lot we're asking for, just basically, some contact information and just an overview of your concept. And then proposals are due July 26th, 3 p.m. on Wednesday, July 26th. And we will then be, for letters of intent and your proposals, we will be blocking your identity and circulating your proposal to our panel of judges to provide some insight. So we're going to be leaning on that panel to really guide us around, here's, this concept looks like it has real promise, and to guide Cleveland Water Alliance around who really looks like they would be a good fit for getting some grant dollars and some additional support to help evolve your idea. And then grantees will, we anticipate, will be announced not terribly long after that. In the interim, make a note of this email address. This is the email address to which you can submit questions or requests for clarification. We really encourage you to use this email address and to not try to contact any of our judges panel at all. That could actually disqualify you. So, work on your idea and let Cleveland Water Alliance be a little bit of a buffer to help navigate getting you the best responses we can around your questions. Respect the rules, and like I say, there's grant money at the end of this and some really significant opportunity to impact the market and generate some really significant revenue as well. So before I jump into any questions from our audience, I wanted to just ask Brenda to talk a little bit about, volume. So you mentioned at one point that right now you estimate it takes about $1,500 per site to dig down and look at that pipe to be able to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you give a sense of total number of, like, in a city, a metropolitan system, total number of those sites that would need to be assessed, so we get a sense of scale?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amy. And every public water system is different. A lot of it depends on the size of the public water system. Some of the smaller systems may have just 1,000 service lines in that entire public water system. Larger systems may have 450,000 connections. So basically, in some systems, you're looking at anything pre-1986, because that's the last year that service lines were allowed to be used at the federal level. A lot of public water systems discontinued the number of lead service lines before then. For example, if 200,000 connections could have a lead service line, every single one of those has to be investigated. So 200,000 times 1,500 is a lot of money. Whereas you can assign a contractor to do that work, or you can say, hey, contractor, go take out the lead at this site. You're going to save public water systems a lot of money. And if the technology actually works, this is a tool that either the contractors or the public water systems will be purchasing to help flesh out their inventory and save themselves millions and millions of dollars in the long run.
So just to sort of reinforce that point. So if I am a utility worker or a contractor and I spend all day going house to house to house to, just see whether or not what the material is of a service line, it would cost $1,500 for each house that I am walking along
absolutely.
to see what that is. And so just to give our innovators a sense of like, if we can get to a point where we have a utility worker be able to do 60 houses in a day, that would have otherwise cost $60 times 1,500, 60 houses times $1,500 for a single day of work. If something is able to detect quickly and easily, is where you can start seeing some price points and the type of revenue you'd be able to generate if you're able to come in below that. So and then could you, Brenda, talk a little bit about how many utilities you would guess are impacted in the United States and whether or not this is an
Every
issue?
single utility in the United States is under the same requirement. So unless your utility is blessed with a robust record set of both city-owned and customer-owned material, you have to flesh out this inventory. Currently, most systems have about 99% unknown on the customer side. Many of us have started methods of trying to get customers to submit photos of their material service lines coming into the home. But a lot of times customers will submit a photo of the gas line or the sewer stack pipe or even a dryer vent, which of course are not water service lines. And it's nothing bad about the customer, it's just no one's ever taught them about the built water system, which is another goal of what public water systems are challenged to do, is teach customers and also get data from them that's accurate. So as Evie said, when we do pothole excavation or dig up excavation or hydro excavation, a contract crew of 2 to 4 people can only do between 6 to 10 service lines per day. And that is because they literally have to take a backhoe and dig. And then when they get close to the depth of the service line, they have to stop digging with the backhoe or hydro excavation and dig by hand to make sure they don't damage that infrastructure. If the service line is in concrete, of course, you have the challenges of the concrete restoration. If the service line is in grass, the curb stop's in grass, you have to see on both sides of that curb stop. And then you have the homeowners, what they really care about is when their grass will be restored. So if there's any method to just transport a device over the top of the surface of the ground without disturbing it, that saves, you could probably do 1,000 homes in a day instead of just 8. So it's going to save a lot of time and a lot of money.
So I'm going to ask our colleague Emily to help us with any questions that may be coming in. Any questions, please enter them into the chat or the Q&A. And Emily, what are we seeing?
So we don't have any questions submitted just yet via our audience, but I'd like to ask a quick question about any promising technologies that we may have already seen in this space.
Brenda?
It's a tough one to answer. There are people with some ideas out there, but nothing has been able to accurately detect buried service line material through the soil. I know there's people working on it. but it could be one of you here on the call or listening to this later on that comes up with the idea that will probably make you a millionaire, because everyone's going to want to buy the technology that actually works, that also doesn't negatively impact water quality. The whole purpose of taking out lead service lines is to make sure people have very good water quality in their homes. Some systems have good water quality with the lead line. Some systems have high lead in the water, and it's just a matter of having the customer's confidence in drinking water at that tap.
Brenda, I also remember us hearing some folks that would say, well, what about doing water quality testing inside the home? I know, as you mentioned, it's very tough to schedule any kind of visit to the home. I know there's also sort of liability issues in terms of utility folks going into the home, but could you talk a little bit about, from the technical standpoint, if somebody had something to detect lead within the water itself, what does that tell us and what doesn't it tell us?
The challenges of, if there is lead in the water, it doesn't tell you where that lead came from. Lead service lines are one of the places, the pipe that carries the water from the main into the home is one of the places lead could be found. But lead was allowed to be used in solder as well as faucets, and how much lead is in there and whether the plumbing was installed right and whether someone has their electricity property grounded. Having a positive detection for lead in water doesn't tell you where the lead is and what the issue is. We do know that there are some faucets that people have installed in their homes that are not meant for potable drinking water that do have high lead levels on the inside, and that can be reflected. In the case of other public water systems, even though a customer has a lead service line, their corrosion control methods, which are typically orthophosphate as well as pH control, make it so that even if you take a water sample and even if you know it has lead service line, it won't always show up in the water. So it's very water system dependent. So we need a technology that works universally across all these systems, simply on the outside of the homes. We had a project a number of years ago with US EPA to get just 40 homes to participate in a water sampling research project. And it took many, many, many hours of phone calls and scheduling to be able to get in their home to do the sampling that was needed to see if we could actually detect lead in water. The water samples.
Thanks, Brenda. It looks like we do have some questions. Go ahead, Emma.
A couple of questions have trickled in. The first one is about the lead service line research facility, and it is, do you still have the test bed of lead lines? Sorry if I already answered, but they had to leave for a couple of minutes. So could you provide those details again, Brenda?
Yeah. So Cleveland Water has numerous test beds available. There are test beds where they have concrete over the service line material type. We have a test bed where water can flow through the pipe. We have others underneath the soil where water would not be flowing, but all types of service line material, which is copper, galvanized, plastic, and lead, are buried, and the method can be tested over top of these to see if it accurately can find what material is buried where. We don't give out the details of what is buried where. It's up to the technology to determine that.
And then just to add to that, so we, obviously this testing facility, we do know where those lines are, so we're able to provide feedback to the innovator and say, yes, you got this right, or some overall stats of, just to help guide the innovator to further evolve their technology. So even if you come and you trial your technology and maybe it didn't go that well, you're also welcome to come back and trial again as you evolve your technology.
So we, as from the public water systems perspective, is we want to make sure that the technology is accurate and you're not selling something that doesn't really work in the real world. But we also, we want to help you along the way. So it's that balancing act of, this technology looks like it has promise. This could work versus giving you the answers and having something that doesn't work in the real world. And that's where Cleveland Water Alliance is going to be that strong partner to vet the technologies and make sure public water systems know that when something is finally developed, that this technology actually works.
Thank you so much for those details, Brenda. Our next question is, if we provide a potential solution, what type of larger funding would be available to help scale?
So I'll take that one. So there are a range of different possibilities. So this is sort of an early stage support open innovation challenge to help you take your idea and get some grant dollars to evolve it into a prototype. We also anticipate having additional rounds of this open innovation challenge that will also provide some actual prize dollars. And in addition to that, we also anticipate having a range of different partners that may be willing or interested to co-invest. And Cleveland Water Alliance also has a seed fund that we're putting together that we anticipate having available to innovators as they further evolve your technologies. Any additional questions?
Yes, it looks like we have one more. How are you thinking of lead-lined galvanized pipes? Even with a robust surface detection method for lead service lines, it would most likely miss those lines.
So that's a great question. That's something we've been discussing internally amongst a couple of the larger public water systems of who has lead line galvanized pipes. There's other types of plumbing that you'll hear old timers say, I had this pipe and it did this and this, which means it's not lead galvanized or copper, but I have no clue what it was. It was 10 years ago. So those are anomalies that are out there in the real world. And in terms of the lead line galvanized, if the technology reads a service line as galvanized, a public water system is going to know whether or not galvanized was ever used on the city side or the customer side. I believe typically in most systems did not use galvanized on the city-owned side. That is true for some of the larger water systems in Ohio. It was either lead or copper, always. On the customer side material, customers were responsible for, or the home builder was responsible for installing the customer service line and connecting it to the city's portion of the service line. And if we look back in history, we know that Montgomery Ward and Sears sold homes through a catalog. You went to the catalog, you ordered your house. If you lived in a city that had public water available, you could order a customer plumbing kit, and that was galvanized plumbing because galvanized plumbing screws together. So if we have a galvanized detection on a customer side, and if it was, or could have ever been downstream of lead, federal law says we must treat that as a lead service line. So the question of, is it galvanized, with lead in the middle is irrelevant. And when we contact that property owner, the outside diameter of the pipe coming through the floor would indicate if it's lead line galvanized. Because when you see a lead line galvanized pipe, even though the inside diameter is going to be less than 1 inch, the outside diameter wouldn't match that. It would be like 1.5 to 2 inches.
Go ahead, Emily. Looks like another one.
All right, we had another one roll in. Would technologies be required to be involved in the early stage, i.e. prototype build, to qualify for the additional rounds mentioned with the prize money?
I would say not necessarily. We're going to be flexible because, as I say, this has not been solved, and we're really honestly looking for solutions. This isn't just about having a contest. What we will be looking for is a story of your evolution. So, if for example, you get a grant out of this challenge that includes, that's $25,000, and then you're still at just a pure concept again when we have our next round, that's going to be a flag. We're looking for progress, but we also understand that progress may include things like, deeper research on different types of detection, whether it's, electrochemical or microwave or acoustic or whatever that might be. We want to understand what your progress has been and what it will continue to be. So that's what we'll be looking for. And I'll also tell you, something about this test bed, the test bed program that CWA does and that we work with our partners to do is really about providing some type of evidence-based validation. And that also for Cleveland Water Alliance means that you become an investable entity, an investable in innovation. So we're trying to support a process that enables you to provide that validation process, because we also recognize you're going to need funding to make progress and to scale. And that evidence-based and market-based feedback and validation is what also enables Cleveland Water Alliance to connect you with those further that further capital to really evolve your opportunity. Any other questions?
It looks like that's all our questions for today.
Great. Well, as I say, I'm just going to back this up one more time. Open innovation at clewad.org. This enables us to survey our panel of experts to help get your questions answered. And like I say, letters of intent, it's coming up, but it's not a heavy lift. Just submit a short blurb and contact information. It's all available in the downloadable request for proposals, proposal concepts, request for technology concepts. And all you need to know is in that document. Take a look, and we're very excited to see what you all come up with. Good luck, and more to come.